One day, after having admitted that, with an overwhelming run of good luck, there might be one chance of success in 1,000, he pretended to yield entirely to the doctor's wishes. But in order to still put off the journey, he opened the most varied series of subterfuges. He threw himself back upon questioning the utility of the expedition, its opportuneness, etc. This discovery of the sources of the Nile, was it likely to be of any use? Would one have really labored for the welfare of humanity? When, after all, the African tribes should have been civilized, would they be any happier? Were folk certain that civilization had not its chosen abode there rather than in Europe? Perhaps. And then, couldn't one wait a little longer? The trip across Africa would certainly be accomplished some day, and in a less hazardous manner. In another month, or in 6 months before the year was over, some explorer would undoubtedly come in, etc., etc. These hints produced an effect exactly opposite to what was desired or intended, and the doctor trembled with impatience. "Are you willing, then, wretched Dick, are you willing, false friend, that this glory should belong to another? Must I then be untrue to my past history, recall before obstacles that are not serious, requite with cowardly hesitation what both the English government and the Royal Society of London have done for me?" "But," resumed Kennedy, who made great use of that conjunction. "But," said the doctor, "are you not aware that my journey is to compete with the success of the expeditions now on foot? Don't you know that fresh explorers are advancing toward the center of Africa?" "Still, listen to me, Dick, and cast your eyes over that map." Dick glanced over it with resignation. "Now ascend the course of the Nile." "I have ascended it," replied the Scotchman with docility. "Stop at Gondokoro." "I am there." And Kennedy thought to himself how easy such a trip was, on the map. Now take one of the points of these dividers, and let it rest upon that place, beyond which the most daring explorers have scarcely gone. "I have done so." "And now look along the coast for the island of Zanzibar, in latitude 6 degrees south." "I have it." "Now follow the same parallel and arrive at Kaize." "I have done so." "Run up again along the 33rd degree of longitude to the opening of Lake Aucariau, at the point where Lieutenant Speke had to halt." "I am there a little more, and I should have tumbled into the lake." "Very good. Now do you know what we have the right to suppose, according to the information given by the tribes that live along its shores?" "I haven't the least idea." "Why, that this lake, the lower extremity of which is in 2 degrees and 30 minutes, must extend also 2 degrees and a half above the equator." "Really?" "Well, from this northern extremity there flows a stream which must necessarily join the Nile, if it be not the Nile itself." "That is indeed curious." "Then let the other point of your dividers rest upon that extremity of Lake Aucariau." "It is done, friend Ferguson." "Now how many degrees can you count between the 2 points?" "Scarcely 2. "And do you know what that means, Dick?" "Not the least in the world." "Why, that makes scarcely 120 miles, in other words a nothing." "Almost nothing, Samuel." "Well, do you know what is taking place at this moment?" "No, upon my honor I do not." "Very well then, I'll tell you. The Geographical Society regard as very important the exploration of this lake of which Speke caught a glimpse. Under their auspices, Lieutenant, now Captain, Speke has associated with him Captain Grant, of the army in India. They have put themselves at the head of a numerous and well-equipped expedition. Their mission is to ascend the lake and return to Gondokoro. They have received a subsidy of more than £5,000, and the governor of the Cape of Good Hope has placed Hottentot soldiers at their disposal. They set out from Zanzibar at the close of October 1860. In the meanwhile, John Petherick, the English consul at the city of Khartoum, has received about £700 from the Foreign Office. He is to equip a steamer at Khartoum, stock it with sufficient provisions, and make his way to Gondokoro. There he will await Captain Speke's caravan and be able to replenish its supplies to some extent. "Well planned," said Kennedy. "You can easily see, then, that time presses if we are to take part in these exploring labours. And that is not all, since, while some are thus advancing with sure steps to the discovery of the sources of the Nile, others are penetrating to the very heart of Africa." "On foot," said Kennedy. "Yes, on foot," rejoined the doctor, without noticing the insinuation. Dr. Krapf proposes to push forward in the west by way of the Job, a river lying under the equator. Baron de Deccan has already set out from Monbaz, has reconnoitred the mountains of Kenya and Kilimanjaro, and is now plunging in toward the center. But all this time on foot. On foot or on mules? Exactly the same, so far as I am concerned, ejaculated Kennedy. Lastly, resumed the doctor, M. de Huglin, the Austrian vice-consul at Khartoum, has just organized a very important expedition, the first aim of which is to search for the traveller Vogel, who in 1853 was sent into the Soudan to associate himself with the labours of Dr. Barth. In 1856 he quitted Bornu, and determined to explore the unknown country that lies between Lake Tchad and Darfur. Nothing has been seen of him since that time. Letters that were received in Alexandria in 1860 said that he was killed at the order of the King of Wadai, but other letters, addressed by Dr. Hartmann to the traveller's father, relate that, according to the recital of a letter of Bornu, Vogel was merely held as a prisoner at Wara. All hope is not then lost, hence a committee has been organized under the presidency of the regent of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. My friend Petermann is its secretary. A national subscription has provided for the expense of the expedition, whose strength has been increased by the voluntary accession of several learned men, and M. de Huglin set out from Maswa in the month of June. While engaged in looking for Vogel, he is also to explore all the country between the Nile and Lake Tchad, that is to say, to knit together the operations of Captain Speke and those of Dr. Barth, and then Africa will have been traversed from east to west. Well, said the canny Scot, since everything is getting on so well, what's the use of our going down there? Dr. Ferguson made no reply, but contented himself with a significant shrug of the shoulders. Chapter 6. A servant match him, he can see the satellites of Jupiter, Dick and Joe hard at it, doubt and faith, the weighing ceremony, Joe and Wellington, he gets a half-crown. Dr. Ferguson had a servant who answered with alacrity to the name of Joe. He was an excellent fellow, who testified the most absolute confidence in his master, and the most unlimited devotion to his interests, even anticipating his wishes and orders, which were always intelligently executed. In fine, he was a Caleb without the growling, and a perfect pattern of constant good humour. Had he been made on purpose for the place, it could not have been better done. Ferguson put himself entirely in his hands, so far as the ordinary details of existence were concerned, and he did well. Incomparable, whole-souled Joe, a servant who orders your dinner, who likes what you like, who packs your trunk without forgetting your socks or your linen, who has charge of your keys and your secrets and takes no advantage of all this. But then, what a man the doctor was in the eyes of this worthy Joe, with what respect and what confidence the latter received all his decisions. When Ferguson had spoken, he would be a fool who should attempt to question the matter. Everything he thought was exactly right, everything he said the perfection of wisdom, everything he ordered to be done quite feasible, all that he undertook practicable, all that he accomplished admirable. You might have cut Joe to pieces, not an agreeable operation to be sure, and yet he would not have altered his opinion of his master. So when the doctor conceived the project of crossing Africa through the air, for Joe the thing was already done. Obstacles no longer existed. From the moment when the doctor had made up his mind to start, he had arrived, along with his faithful attendant too, for the noble fellow knew, without a word uttered about it, that he would be one of the party. Moreover, he was just the man to render the greatest service by his intelligence and his wonderful agility. Had the occasion arisen to name a professor of gymnastics for the monkeys in the zoological garden, who are smart enough by the way, Joe would certainly have received the appointment. Leaping, climbing, almost flying, these were all sport to him. If Ferguson was the head and Kennedy the arm, Joe was to be the right hand of the expedition. He had already accompanied his master on several journeys, and had a smattering of science appropriate to his condition and style of mind, but he was especially remarkable for a sort of mild philosophy, a charming turn of optimism. In his sight everything was easy, logical, natural, and consequently he could see no use in complaining or grumbling. Among other gifts, he possessed a strength and range of vision that were perfectly surprising. He enjoyed, in common with Moslin, Kepler's professor, the rare faculty of distinguishing the satellites of Jupiter with the naked eye, and of counting 14 of the stars in the group of Pleiades, the remotest of them being only of the 9th magnitude. He presumed none the more for that. On the contrary, he made his bow to you at a distance, and when occasion arose he bravely knew how to use his eyes. With such profound faith as Joe felt in the doctor, it is not to be wondered at that incessant discussions sprang up between him and Kennedy, without any lack of respect to the latter, however. One doubted, the other believed. One had a prudent foresight, the other blind confidence. The doctor, however, vibrated between doubt and confidence. That is to say, he troubled his head with neither one nor the other. "Well, Mr. Kennedy," Joe would say. "Well, my boy. The moment's at hand. It seems that we are to sail for the moon." "You mean the mountains of the moon, which are not quite so far off. But never mind, one trip is just as dangerous as the other." "Dangerous? What, with a man like Dr. Ferguson?" "I don't want to spoil your illusions, my good Joe, but this undertaking of his is nothing more nor less than the act of a madman. He won't go, though." "He won't go, eh? Then you haven't seen his balloon at Mitchell's factory in the borough?" "I'll take precious good care to keep away from it." "Well, you'll lose a fine sight, sir. What a splendid thing it is, what a pretty shape, what a nice car, how snug we'll feel in it." "Then you really think of going with your master?" "I," answered Joe with an accent of profound conviction. "Why, I'd go with him wherever he pleases. Who ever heard of such a thing? Leave him to go off alone after we've been all over the world together? Who would help him when he was tired? Who would give him a hand in climbing over the rocks? Who would attend him when he was sick? No, Mr. Kennedy, Joe will always stick to the doctor." "You're a fine fellow, Joe. But then you're coming with us?" "Oh, certainly," said Kennedy. "That is to say, I will go with you up to the last moment, to prevent Samuel even then from being guilty of such an act of folly. I will follow him as far as Zanzibar, so as to stop him there if possible." "You'll stop nothing at all, Mr. Kennedy, with all respect to you, sir. My master is no hare-brained person. He takes a long time to think over what he means to do, and then, when he once gets started, the evil one himself couldn't make him give it up." "Well, we'll see about that." "Don't flatter yourself, sir, but then the main thing is to have you with us. For a hunter like you, sir, Africa's a great country, so either way you won't be sorry for the trip." "No, that's a fact, I shan't be sorry for it, if I can get this crazy man to give up his scheme." "By the way," said Joe, "you know that the weighing comes off today." "The weighing? What weighing?" "Why, my master and you and I are all to be weighed today." "What, like horse jockeys?" "Yes, like jockeys. Only never fear, you won't be expected to make yourself lean if you're found to be heavy. You'll go as you are." "Well, I can tell you I am not going to let myself be weighed," said Kennedy firmly. "But, sir, it seems that the doctor's machine requires it." "Well, his machine will have to do without it." "Humph, and suppose that it couldn't go up then?" "Egad, that's all I want." Come, Mr. Kennedy, my master will be sending for us directly." "I shan't go." "Oh, now you won't vex the doctor in that way." "Aye, that I will." "Well," said Joe with a laugh, "you say that because he's not here, but when he says to your face, 'Dick, with all respect to you, sir, Dick, I want to know exactly how much you weigh,' you'll go, I warrant it." "No, I will not go." At this moment the doctor entered his study, where this discussion had been taking place, and as he came in cast a glance at Kennedy, who did not feel altogether at his ease. "Dick," said the doctor, "come with Joe, I want to know how much you both weigh." "But you may keep your hat on, come," and Kennedy went. They repaired in company to the workshop of the Messrs. Mitchell, where one of those so-called Roman scales was in readiness. It was necessary, by the way, for the doctor to know the weight of his companions, so as to fix the equilibrium of his balloon, so he made Dick get up on the platform of the scales. The latter, without making any resistance, said, in an undertone, "Oh, well, that doesn't bind me to anything." 153 pounds, said the doctor, noting it down on his tablets. "Am I too heavy?" "Why, no, Mr. Kennedy," said Joe, "and then you know I am light to make up for it." So saying, Joe, with enthusiasm, took his place on the scales, and very nearly upset them in his ready haste. He struck the attitude of Wellington where he is made to ape Achilles, at Hyde Park entrance, and was superb in it without the shield. 120 pounds, wrote the doctor. "Aha," said Joe with a smile of satisfaction, and why did he smile? He never could tell himself. "It's my turn now," said Ferguson, and he put down £135 to his own account. "All three of us," said he, "do not weigh much more than £400. "But, sir," said Joe, "if it was necessary for your expedition, I could make myself thinner by £20 by not eating so much." "Useless, my boy," replied the doctor. "You may eat as much as you like, and here's £half-a-crown to buy you the ballast." Chapter 7. Geometrical details, calculation of the capacity of the balloon, the double receptacle, the covering, the car, the mysterious apparatus, the provisions and stores, the final summing up. Dr. Ferguson had long been engaged upon the details of his expedition. It is easy to comprehend that the balloon, that marvelous vehicle which was to convey him through the air, was the constant object of his solicitude. At the outset, in order not to give the balloon too ponderous dimensions, he had decided to fill it with hydrogen gas, which is 14.5 times lighter than common air. The production of this gas is easy, and it has given the greatest satisfaction hitherto in aerostatic experiments. The doctor, according to very accurate calculations, found that, including the articles indispensable to his journey and his apparatus, he should have to carry a weight of £4,000. Therefore he had to find out what would be the ascensional force of a balloon capable of raising such a weight, and consequently, what would be its capacity. A weight of £4,000 is represented by a displacement of the air amounting to 44,847 cubic feet. Or, in other words, 44,847 cubic feet of air weigh about 4,000 pounds. By giving the balloon these cubic dimensions, and filling it with hydrogen gas, instead of common air, the former being 14.5 times lighter, and weighing therefore only 276 pounds, a difference of 3,724 pounds in equilibrium is produced, and it is this difference between the weight of the gas contained in the balloon and the weight of the surrounding atmosphere that constitutes the ascensional force of the former. However, were the 44,847 cubic feet of gas of which we speak all introduced into the balloon, it would be entirely filled. But that would not do because, as the balloon continued to mount into the more rarefied layers of the atmosphere, the gas within would dilate, and soon burst the cover containing it. Balloons, then, are usually only 2/3 filled. But the doctor, in carrying out a project known only to himself, resolved to fill his balloon only 1/2, and since he had to carry 44,847 cubic feet of gas, to give his balloon nearly double capacity, he arranged it in that elongated oval shape which has come to be preferred. The horizontal diameter was 50 feet, and the vertical diameter 75 feet. He thus obtained a spheroid, the capacity of which amounted in round numbers to 90,000 cubic feet. Could Dr. Ferguson have used 2 balloons, his chances of success would have been increased, for should one burst in the air, he could, by throwing out ballast, keep himself up with the other. But the management of 2 balloons would necessarily be very difficult, in view of the problem how to keep them both at an equal ascensional force. After having pondered the matter carefully, Dr. Ferguson, by an ingenious arrangement, combined the advantages of 2 balloons without incurring their inconveniences. He constructed 2 of different sizes, and enclosed the smaller in the larger one. His external balloon, which had the dimensions given above, contained a less one of the same shape, which was only 45 feet in horizontal and 68 feet in vertical diameter. The capacity of this interior balloon was only 67,000 cubic feet. It was to float in the fluid surrounding it. A valve opened from one balloon into the other, and thus enabled the aeronaut to communicate with both. This arrangement offered the advantage that if gas had to be let off so as to descend, that which was in the outer balloon would go first, and were it completely emptied, the smaller one would still remain intact. The outer envelope might then be cast off as a useless encumbrance, and the second balloon, left free to itself, would not offer the same hold to the currents of air as a half-inflated one must needs present. Moreover, in case of an accident happening to the outside balloon, such as getting torn, for instance, the other would remain intact. The balloons were made of a strong but light Leon silk, coated with gutta-percha. This gummy resinous substance is absolutely waterproof and also resists acids and gas perfectly. The silk was doubled at the upper extremity of the oval, where most of the strain would come. Such an envelope as this could retain the inflating fluid for any length of time. It weighed half a pound per 9 square feet. Hence the surface of the outside balloon being about 11,600 square feet, its envelope weighed 650 pounds. The envelope of the second or inner balloon, having 9,200 square feet of surface, weighed only about 510 pounds, or say 1,160 pounds for both. The network that supported the car was made of very strong hempen cord, and the two valves were the object of the most minute and careful attention, as the rudder of a ship would be. The car, which was of a circular form and 15 feet in diameter, was made of wickerwork, strengthened with a slight covering of iron, and protected below by a system of elastic springs to deaden the shock of collision. Its weight, along with that of the network, did not exceed 250 pounds. In addition to the above, the doctor caused to be constructed 2 sheet iron chests 2 lines in thickness. These were connected by means of pipes furnished with stopcocks. He joined to these a spiral, 2 inches in diameter, which terminated in 2 branch pieces of unequal length, the longer of which, however, was 25 feet in height, and the shorter only 15 feet. These sheet iron chests were embedded in the car in such a way as to take up the least possible amount of space. The spiral, which was not to be adjusted until some future moment, was packed up, separately, along with a very strong Bunsen electric battery. This apparatus had been so ingeniously combined that it did not weigh more than 700 pounds, even including 25 gallons of water in another receptacle. The instruments provided for the journey consisted of 2 barometers, 2 thermometers, 2 compasses, a sextant, 2 chronometers, an artificial horizon, and an altazimuth, to throw out the height of distant and inaccessible objects. The Greenwich Observatory had placed itself at the doctor's disposal. The latter, however, did not intend to make experiments in physics. He merely wanted to be able to know in what direction he was passing, and to determine the position of the principal rivers, mountains, and towns. He also provided himself with 3 thoroughly tested iron anchors, and a light but strong silk ladder 50 feet in length. He at the same time carefully weighed his stores of provision, which consisted of tea, coffee, biscuit, salted meat, and pemmican, a preparation which comprises many nutritive elements in a small space. Besides a sufficient stock of pure brandy, he arranged 2 water tanks, each of which contained 22 gallons. The consumption of these articles would necessarily, little by little, diminish the weight to be sustained, for it must be remembered that the equilibrium of a balloon floating in the atmosphere is extremely sensitive. The loss of an almost insignificant weight suffices to produce a very noticeable displacement. Nor did the doctor forget an awning to shelter the car, nor the coverings and blankets that were to be the bedding of the journey, nor some fowling pieces and rifles, with their requisite supply of powder and ball. Here is the summing up of his various items, and their weight as he computed it. Ferguson 135 pounds, Kennedy 153, Joe 120, weight of the outside balloon 650, weight of the second balloon 510, car and network 280, anchors, instruments, awnings, and sundry utensils, guns, coverings, meat, pemmican, biscuits, tea, coffee, brandy 386, water 400, apparatus 700, weight of the hydrogen 276, ballast 200, 4,000 pounds. Such were the items of the 4,000 pounds that Dr. Ferguson proposed to carry up with him. He took only 200 pounds of ballast for unforeseen emergencies, as he remarked, since otherwise he did not expect to use any, thanks to the peculiarity of his apparatus. Chapter 8. Joe's importance, the commander of the Resolute, Kennedy's arsenal, mutual amenities, the farewell dinner, departure on the 21st of February, the doctor's scientific sessions, Duvalier, Livingstone, details of the aerial voyage, Kennedy silenced. About the 10th of February, the preparations were pretty well completed, and the balloons, firmly secured one within the other, were altogether finished. They had been subjected to a powerful pneumatic pressure in all parts, and the test gave excellent evidence of their solidity and of the care applied in their construction. Joe hardly knew what he was about with delight. He trotted incessantly to and fro between his home in Greek Street and the Mitchell establishment, always full of business, but always in the highest spirits, giving details of the affair to people who did not even ask him. So proud was he, above all things, of being permitted to accompany his master. I have even a shrewd suspicion that what with showing the balloon, explaining the plans and views of the doctor, giving folks a glimpse of the latter, through a half-opened window, or pointing him out as he passed along the streets, the clever scamp earned a few half-crowns, but we must not find fault with him for that. He had as much right as anybody else to speculate upon the admiration and curiosity of his contemporaries. On the 16th of February, the Resolute cast anchor near Greenwich. She was a screw propeller of 800 tons, a fast sailer, and the very vessel that had been sent out to the polar regions to revictual the last expedition of Sir James Ross. Her commander, Captain Bennet, had the name of being a very amiable person, and he took a particular interest in the doctor's expedition, having been one of that gentleman's admirers for a long time. Bennet was rather a man of science than a man of war, which did not, however, prevent his vessel from carrying 4 carronades, that had never hurt anybody to be sure, but had performed the most pacific duty in the world. The hold of the Resolute was so arranged as to find a stowing place for the balloon. The latter was shipped with the greatest precaution on the 18th of February, and was then carefully deposited at the bottom of the vessel in such a way as to prevent accident. The car and its accessories, the anchors, the cords, the supplies, the water tanks, which were to be filled on arriving, all were embarked and put away under Ferguson's own eyes. 10 tons of sulphuric acid and 10 tons of iron filings were put on board for the future production of the hydrogen gas. The quantity was more than enough, but it was well to be provided against accident. The apparatus to be employed in manufacturing the gas, including some 30 empty casks, was also stowed away in the hold. These various preparations were terminated on the 18th of February in the evening. 2 staterooms, comfortably fitted up, were ready for the reception of Dr. Ferguson and his friend Kennedy. The latter, all the while swearing that he would not go, went on board with a regular arsenal of hunting weapons, among which were 2 double-barreled breech-loading fowling pieces, and a rifle that had withstood every test, of the make of Purdy, Moore and Dixon, at Edinburgh. With such a weapon a marksman would find no difficulty in lodging a bullet in the eye of a chamois at the distance of 2,000 paces. Along with these implements, he had 2 of Colt's 6-shooters, for unforeseen emergencies. His powder case, his cartridge pouch, his lead and his bullets did not exceed a certain weight prescribed by the doctor. The 3 travellers got themselves to rights on board during the working hours of February 19th. They were received with much distinction by the captain and his officers, the doctor continuing as reserved as ever, and thinking of nothing but his expedition. Dick seemed a good deal moved, but was unwilling to betray it, while Joe was fairly dancing and breaking out in laughable remarks. The worthy fellow soon became the jester and merry andrew of the boatswain's mess, where a berth had been kept for him. On the 20th, a grand farewell dinner was given to Dr. Ferguson and Kennedy by the Royal Geographical Society. Commander Bennet and his officers were present at the entertainment, which was signalized by copious libations and numerous toasts. Healths were drunk, in sufficient abundance to guarantee all the guests a lifetime of centuries. Sir Francis 1000 presided with restrained but dignified feeling. To his own supreme confusion, Dick Kennedy came in for a large share in the jovial felicitations of the night. After having drunk to the intrepid Ferguson, the glory of England, they had to drink to the no less courageous Kennedy, his daring companion. Dick blushed a good deal in that passed for modesty, whereupon the applause redoubled and Dick blushed again. A message from the Queen arrived while they were at dessert. Her Majesty offered her compliments to the 2 travellers and expressed her wishes for their safe and successful journey. This, of course, rendered imperative fresh toasts to Her Most Gracious Majesty. At midnight, after touching farewells and warm shaking of hands, the guests separated. The boats of the Resolute were in waiting at the stairs of Westminster Bridge. The captain leaped in, accompanied by his officers and passengers, and the rapid current of the Thames, aiding the strong arms of the rowers, bore them swiftly to Greenwich. In an hour's time all were asleep on board. The next morning, February 21st, at 3 o'clock, the furnaces began to roar. At 5 the anchors were weighed, and the Resolute, powerfully driven by her screw, began to plough the water toward the mouth of the Thames. It is needless to say that the topic of conversation with everyone on board was Dr. Ferguson's enterprise. Seeing and hearing the doctor soon inspired everybody with such confidence that, in a very short time, there was no one, excepting the incredulous Scotchman, on the steamer who had the least doubt of the perfect feasibility and success of the expedition. During the long, unoccupied hours of the voyage, the doctor held regular sittings, with lectures on geographical science, in the officers' mess room. These young men felt an intense interest in the discoveries made during the last 40 years in Africa, and the doctor related to them the explorations of Barth, Burton, Speke, and Grant, and depicted the wonders of this vast, mysterious country, now thrown open on all sides to the investigations of science. On the north, the young Duveyrier was exploring Sahara and bringing the chiefs of the Tuaregs to Paris. Under the inspiration of the French government, 2 expeditions were preparing, which, descending from the north and coming from the west, would cross each other at Timbuktu. In the south, the indefatigable Livingstone was still advancing toward the equator, and since March 1862, he had, in company with Mackenzie, ascended the river Ravuniya. The 19th century would assuredly not pass, contended the doctor, without Africa having been compelled to surrender the secrets she has kept locked up in her bosom for 6,000 years. But the interest of Dr. Ferguson's hearers was excited to the highest pitch when he made known to them, in detail, the preparations for his own journey. They took pleasure in verifying his calculations, they discussed them, and the doctor frankly took part in the discussion. As a general thing, they were surprised at the limited quantity of provision that he took with him, and one day one of the officers questioned him on that subject. "That peculiar point astonishes you, does it?" said Ferguson. "It does indeed. But how long do you think my trip is going to last? Whole months? If so, you are greatly mistaken. Were it to be a long one, we should be lost, we should never get back. But you must know that the distance from Zanzibar to the coast of Senegal is only 3,500, say 4,000 miles. Well, at the rate of 240 miles every 12 hours, which does not come near the rapidity of our railroad trains, by travelling day and night, it would take only 7 days to cross Africa. But then you could see nothing, make no geographical observations, or reconnoitre the face of the country." "Ah," replied the doctor, "if I am master of my balloon, if I can ascend and descend at will, I shall stop when I please, especially when 2 violent currents of air threaten to carry me out of my way with them." "And you will encounter such," said Captain Bennet. "There are tornadoes that sweep at the rate of more than 240 miles per hour. You see then that with such speed as that, we could cross Africa in 12 hours. One would rise at Zanzibar and go to bed at St. Louis." "But," rejoined the officer, "could any balloon withstand the wear and tear of such velocity?" "It has happened before," replied Ferguson, "and the balloon withstood it." "Perfectly well. It was at the time of the coronation of Napoleon in 1804. The aeronaut Jernerin sent up a balloon at Paris about 11 o'clock in the evening. It bore the following inscription in letters of gold: Paris 25 Frimaire, year Roman 13, coronation of the Emperor Napoleon by His Holiness Pius Roman 7. On the next morning the inhabitants of Rome saw the same balloon soaring above the Vatican, whence it crossed the Campagna, and finally fluttered down into the lake of Bracciano. So you see, gentlemen, that a balloon can resist such velocities. "A balloon, that might be but a man," insinuated Kennedy. "Yes, a man too, for the balloon is always motionless with reference to the air that surrounds it. What moves is the mass of the atmosphere itself. For instance, one may light a taper in the car, and the flame will not even waver. An aeronaut in Garnerin's balloon would not have suffered in the least from the speed, but then I have no occasion to attempt such velocity, and if I can anchor to some tree or some favourable inequality of the ground, at night, I shall not fail to do so. Besides, we take provision for 2 months with us after all, and there is nothing to prevent our skilful huntsmen here from furnishing game in abundance when we come to alight." "Ah, Mr. Kennedy," said a young midshipman with envious eyes, "what splendid shots you'll have." "Without counting," said another, "that you'll have the glory as well as the sport." "Gentlemen," replied the hunter, stammering with confusion, "I greatly appreciate your compliments, but they don't belong to me." "You," exclaimed everybody, "don't you intend to go?" "I am not going." "You won't accompany Dr. Ferguson?" "Not only shall I not accompany him, but I am here so as to be present at the last moment to prevent his going." Every eye was now turned to the doctor. "Never mind him," said the latter calmly. "This is a matter that we can't argue with him. At heart he knows perfectly well that he is going." "By St. Andrew," said Kennedy, "I swear." Swear to nothing, friend Dick. You have been ganged and weighed, you and your powder, your guns and your bullets, so don't let us say anything more about it. And in fact, from that day until the arrival at Zanzibar, Dick never opened his mouth. He talked neither about that nor about anything else. He kept absolutely silent. Chapter 9th. They double the Cape. The forecastle, a course of cosmography by Professor Joe, concerning the method of guiding balloons, how to seek out atmospheric currents. Eureka. The Resolute plunged along rapidly toward the Cape of Good Hope, the weather continuing fine, although the sea ran heavier. On the 30th of March, 27 days after the departure from London, the Table Mountain loomed up on the horizon. Cape City, lying at the foot of an amphitheatre of hills, could be distinguished through the ship's glasses, and soon the Resolute cast anchor in the port. But the captain touched there only to replenish his coal bunkers, and that was but a day's job. On the morrow he steered away to the southward, so as to double the southernmost point of Africa and enter the Mozambique Channel. This was not Joe's first sea voyage, and so for his part he soon found himself at home on board. Everybody liked him for his frankness and good humour. A considerable share of his master's renown was reflected upon him. He was listened to as an oracle, and he made no more mistakes than the next one. So while the doctor was pursuing his descriptive course of lecturing in the officers' mess, Joe reigned supreme on the forecastle, holding forth in his own peculiar manner, and making history to suit himself, a style of procedure pursued, by the way, by the greatest historians of all ages and nations. The topic of discourse was, naturally, the aerial voyage. Joe had experienced some trouble in getting the rebellious spirits to believe in it, but once accepted by them, nothing connected with it was any longer an impossibility to the imaginations of the seamen, stimulated by Joe's harangues. Our dazzling narrator persuaded his hearers that, after this trip, many others still more wonderful would be undertaken. In fact, it was to be but the first of a long series of superhuman expeditions. You see, my friends, when a man has had a taste of that kind of travelling, he can't get along afterward with any other. So on our next expedition, instead of going off to one side, we'll go right ahead, going up too all the time. Humph, then you'll go to the moon, said one of the crowd with a stare of amazement. To the moon, exclaimed Joe, to the moon. Pooh, that's too common. Everybody might go to the moon that way. Besides, there's no water there, and you have to carry such a lot of it along with you. Then you have to take air along in bottles so as to breathe. Aye, that's all right, but can a man get a drop of the real stuff there? Said a sailor who liked his toddy. Not a drop, was Joe's answer. No, old fellow, not in the moon, but we're going to skip round among those little twinklers up there, the stars, and the splendid planets that my old man so often talks about. For instance, we'll commence with Saturn. That one with the ring? Asked the boatswain. Yes, the wedding ring, only no one knows what's become of his wife. What, will you go so high up as that? Said one of the ship boys, gaping with wonder. Why, your master must be old Nick himself. Oh no, he's too good for that. But after Saturn, what then? Was the next inquiry of his impatient audience. After Saturn, well, we'll visit Jupiter. A funny place that is, too, where the days are only 9 hours and a half long. A good thing for the lazy fellows, and the years, would you believe it, last 12 of hours, which is fine for folks who have only 6 months to live. They get off a little longer by that. 12 years, ejaculated the boy. Yes, my youngster, so that in that country you'd be toddling after your mammy yet, and that old chap yonder, who looks about 50, would only be a little shaver of 4 1/2. Blazes, that's a good shouted the whole forecastle together. Solemn truth, said Joe stoutly. But what can you expect? When people will stay in this world, they learn nothing and keep as ignorant as bears. But just come along to Jupiter and you'll see. But they have to look out up there, for he's got satellites that are not just the easiest things to pass. All the men laughed, but they more than half believed him. Then he went on to talk about Neptune, where seafaring men get a jovial reception, and Mars, where the military get the best of the sidewalk to such an extent that folks can hardly stand it. Finally, he drew them a heavenly picture of the delights of Venus. And when we get back from that expedition, said the indefatigable narrator, they'll decorate us with the Southern Cross that shines up there in the Creator's buttonhole. Aye, and you'd have well earned it, said the sailors. Thus passed the long evenings on the forecastle in merry chat, and during the same time the doctor went on with his instructive discourses. One day the conversation turned upon the means of directing balloons, and the doctor was asked his opinion about it. "I don't think," said he, "that we shall succeed in finding out a system of directing them. I am familiar with all the plans attempted and proposed, and not one has succeeded, not one is practicable. You may readily understand that I have occupied my mind with this subject, which was, necessarily, so interesting to me, but I have not been able to solve the problem with the appliances now known to mechanical science. We would have to discover a motive power of extraordinary force, and almost impossible lightness of machinery. And even then, we could not resist atmospheric currents of any considerable strength. Until now, the effort has been rather to direct the car than the balloon, and that has been one great error. Still, there are many points of resemblance between a balloon and a ship which is directed at will." "Not at all," retorted the doctor. "There is little or no similarity between the two cases. Air is infinitely less dense than water, in which the ship is only half submerged, while the whole bulk of a balloon is plunged in the atmosphere, and remains motionless with reference to the element that surrounds it." "You think, then, that aerostatic science has said its last word?" "Not at all, not at all. But we must look for another point in the case, and if we cannot manage to guide our balloon, we must at least try to keep it in favorable aerial currents. In proportion as we ascend, the latter become much more uniform and flow more constantly in one direction. They are no longer disturbed by the mountains and valleys that traverse the surface of the globe, and these, you know, are the chief cause of the variations of the wind and the inequality of their force. Therefore, these zones having been once determined, the balloon will merely have to be placed in the currents best adapted to its destination." "But then," continued Captain Bennet, "in order to reach them you must keep constantly ascending or descending. That is the real difficulty, Doctor." "And why, my dear Captain?" "Let us understand one another. It would be a difficulty and an obstacle only for long journeys, and not for short aerial excursions." "And why so, if you please?" "Because you can ascend only by throwing out ballast. You can descend only after letting off gas, and by these processes your ballast and your gas are soon exhausted." "My dear sir, that's the whole question. There is the only difficulty that science need now seek to overcome. The problem is not how to guide the balloon, but how to take it up and down without expending the gas which is its strength, its lifeblood, its soul, if I may use the expression." "You are right, my dear doctor, but this problem is not yet solved. This means has not yet been discovered." "I beg your pardon, it has been discovered." "By whom?" "By me." "By you." You may readily believe that otherwise I should not have risked this expedition across Africa in a balloon. In 24 hours I should have been without gas. "But you said nothing about that in England." "No, I did not want to have myself overhauled in public. I saw no use in that. I made my preparatory experiments in secret and was satisfied. I have no occasion, then, to learn anything more from them." "Well, doctor, would it be proper to ask what is your secret?" "Here it is, gentlemen, the simplest thing in the world." The attention of his auditory was now directed to the doctor in the utmost degree, as he quietly proceeded with his explanation. Chapter 10th. Former experiments, the doctor's 5 receptacles, the gas cylinder, the calorifer, the system of manoeuvring, success certain. "The attempt has often been made, gentlemen," said the doctor, "to rise and descend at will, without losing ballast or gas from the balloon. A French aeronaut, M. Munier, tried to accomplish this by compressing air in an inner receptacle. A Belgian, Dr. Van Heck, by means of wings and paddles, obtained a vertical power that would have sufficed in most cases, but the practical results secured from these experiments have been insignificant. I therefore resolved to go about the thing more directly. So at the start I dispensed with ballast altogether, excepting as a provision for cases of special emergency, such as the breakage of my apparatus or the necessity of ascending very suddenly, so as to avoid unforeseen obstacles. My means of ascent and descent consist simply in dilating or contracting the gas that is in the balloon by the application of different temperatures, and here is the method of obtaining that result. You saw me bring on board with the car several cases or receptacles, the use of which you may not have understood. They are 5 in number. The first contains about 25 gallons of water, to which I add a few drops of sulfuric acid, so as to augment its capacity as a conductor of electricity, and then I decompose it by means of a powerful Bunsen battery. Water, as you know, consists of 2 parts of hydrogen to 1 of oxygen gas. The latter, through the action of the battery, passes at its positive pole into the second receptacle. A third receptacle, placed above the second one, and of double its capacity, receives the hydrogen passing into it by the negative pole. Stopcocks, of which one has an orifice twice the size of the other, communicate between these receptacles and a fourth one, which is called the mixture reservoir, since in it the 2 gases obtained by the decomposition of the water do really commingle. The capacity of this fourth tank is about 41 cubic feet. On the upper part of this tank is a platinum tube provided with a stopcock. You will now readily understand, gentlemen, the apparatus that I have described to you is really a gas cylinder and blowpipe for oxygen and hydrogen, the heat of which exceeds that of a forge fire. This much established, I proceed to the second part of my apparatus. From the lowest part of my balloon, which is hermetically closed, issue 2 tubes a little distance apart. The one starts among the upper layers of the hydrogen gas, the other amid the lower layers. These 2 pipes are provided at intervals with strong jointings of india rubber, which enable them to move in harmony with the oscillations of the balloon. Both of them run down as far as the car, and lose themselves in an iron receptacle of cylindrical form, which is called the heat tank. The latter is closed at its 2 ends by 2 strong plates of the same metal.